Format is typically we have our open forum, and then we can go after that into topics that I sent out as things that we could discuss for tonight. With that being said, who'd like to open up the floor with the first question of the evening? Go ahead, Dennis. You got to mute. You're muted. Space bar. There you go.
Regarding having, I've decided I do need to set up more than one Gmail account. Regarding setting up additional accounts, I know some people have, a lot of accounts, that kind of thing. Do they, I guess I'm kind of curious, do they use their real information on the multiple accounts? In other words, right now for a new account, they're asking for birth date, gender, you don't have to say, they want your location. Do people really have multiple accounts using the birth date? They use fake information. I guess I'm trying to find.
I have a simple question before you continue.
Okay.
What is the goal of what you're trying to do with multiple accounts?
Well, I realized that you can have one account and then put like a plus something something and have all your email in one account. I know you can do that, but I want to have an account like for all my doctors, my CPAP information, my
your medical stuff,
hospital medical stuff in only one account. No, I'm sick and tired of missing stuff, and I want to get it in one. Likewise, I'd like to do something with my investment companies. Maybe I'll have another account for that. Those communications.
Here's what I do.
Yeah.
I subscribe to, there's a company called Proton that makes secure mail. They have a subsidiary or part of their business called SimpleLogin, and they have a free tier and a paid tier. The free tier gives you up to 10 email alias addresses, and you can assign one of them to your doctor, one to your lawyer, one to something else, and you can have them all directed to go into the same Gmail inbox so that you don't have to check 3 different inboxes, but you have 3 unique email addresses, one for each category of clientele or purpose.
But you don't have a choice. They only go into one.
Well, if you have the free version, it all goes into one mailbox.
Okay.
If you pay them, which is now I do, $36 a year, you can have an unlimited number of aliases and an unlimited number of mailboxes. So if you have 2 inboxes or 2 Gmail accounts, you can have 5 email. You can have 10 aliases, and you can decide which one of those aliases goes into which Gmail inbox.
Something else that I want to mention, I have multiple Gmail accounts, and but mine were set up a long time ago, okay? We're talking over 20 years. But with those accounts, now they want more information. Give them the absolute minimum information. And if it asks for your birth date, only give them the month and the year, not the day. I'm not kidding.
What the important thing is to, if you're not going to give them your real information, make sure you have a password manager where you write down what birth date and day and month and year you did put in for that account. Because if you get locked out and they want that information, you have to provide them with what you actually used.
Right.
And you may not remember 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the line.
Yeah, you should always have a email that has another account. It doesn't have to be Gmail. It can be anything. AOL,
Mhm.
if you want. And have that as a backup. They want to verify that it's a good, real email account. And then
Mhm.
also give it a smartphone number so you can get texting.
Mm.
Those
Yeah.
are
Dennis,
two key ways.
I put in the chat. I did a quick search, a Google search, and this is what AI came back with on
Yeah.
setting up multiple Gmail accounts,
Uh-huh.
and just walks you through some of the steps. And you're absolutely correct about having the plus sign as part of your email address, so that would indicate you got more email addresses.
Right.
Bob, you have your hand up.
Yes, I do. Dennis, are you just having difficulty organizing your mail so that you don't miss the medical, the financial, etc.?
No, I guess I know there's categories I could have my mail automatically go into, but I
Yep.
don't want to use that either. I'd rather have a totally distinct Gmail account, separate login, separate password.
How will this make it easier for you not to miss these messages?
That'll make it more likely that you'll miss because you'll have more mailboxes to check.
Well,
Unless you're using a consolidation client.
yeah, the other thing is you can have them forwarded. So, like for instance, anything I have going into my medical Gmail account, I can have all those forwarded to my regular Gmail account. But then if I ever want to start looking up previous emails or where they sent me notifications, I can go to one account and they're all right there. I don't really
Mm-hmm.
like separate categories. If I lose a Gmail account, I've lost everything. So I'm thinking I'd rather have it split out and not lose everything all at one time.
If you lose your Gmail service, you'll lose all your Gmail accounts anyway. If they for some reason wreck everything, although if you get one munged account, you'll still have the others.
That's why you have to have the extra email account for recovery and a
Right.
smartphone number that will give you texting. Those are two methods of being able to get back your account.
Yeah, I like those ideas, right? I could use that Proton mail that Drew was talking about for the backup and use a smartphone for texting. Yeah, I like those ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a phone number for text, and I have another account that's always been there at Yahoo. That's my account that gets all kinds of things buried in it because
Right.
everything comes in there. Gmail, I have just manually reserved for important business, medical, etc. communications. And then I just use categories. And I may have at any given time a couple of hundred emails in each of these categories going back a while. And all I have to do is just click on the category and I see the top 10, which are recent, and I can search any farther down. Now, apparently, some people find that convenient, some people don't. If you need separate accounts for that, go ahead and do that, but I would recommend that at the end of the day, you somehow aggregate everything into maybe a desktop client.
I
Yeah.
was saying that you want to be cautious.
I would always be willing to talk to anybody in off time about SimpleLogin and how it works. I have the $36 a year plan, which is the only plan they have other than free. And when I set up a new doctor account, let's say I go to a new doctor for the first time, I assign him, and they have a portal. Oftentimes now they'll have a portal. I will assign that doctor his own unique email alias, and in my password manager, the portal is, I have my user ID and password, and that is a unique email address just for that one physician. But it doesn't go into a separate Gmail mailbox. It goes into whatever mailbox I tell it to go to.
Another thing that I want to mention here, especially for Gmail, it's highly prized by nefarious people worldwide. They look and troll for Gmail accounts that they can crack into and take over, and they do things in your name that might get you into trouble even though you didn't do them. But
Right.
so you have to set up 2FA or MFA protections on every Gmail account, period.
Actually, Google requires 2FA for
Yeah,
Gmail.
it's required.
That's
It's
good.
mandatory
But
now.
I've been using YubiKey for over 20 years.
Yeah, but you must do some form of 2FA with Gmail. They have a rule. And it
Well,
arose
Yeah.
from what you said, Tim. It arose
I've
from the
had-
problems.
I don't have that for Google. I mean, I guess I could
your
set it
old
up.
account
Well,
probably didn't
it-
need it.
Right.
New accounts,
Yeah.
they do make you have it. But you've
Okay.
got to have it on all Gmail accounts. There is no ifs, ands, or buts.
Okay.
Dennis,
I-
Dennis, I put in the chat the few step-by-step instructions on how to create an additional account in Gmail.
Yeah, I see that. Okay. Good.
Okay.
Yep.
And if you're
Yeah,
going to do
you-
that, I hope you have a good password manager or this SimpleLogin thing.
Yeah, you got to keep good tracks of all this stuff. Next
you're gonna
question. Are we good with this?
Yeah.
Next
Yep.
question, new direction? None? Wow, this
Well,
is
I'll mention
I
something.
was looking at the notes, and you had mentioned, I think the first entry was passkeys, right?
yes, passkeys.
I have been investigating passkeys for quite some time, and I use as my password manager KeyPass XC, not the original, but XC. And on Windows, they support passkeys, but on Linux, they do not. Linux is not yet fully developed for passkeys. And according to all of the research I've done, the number one way to do passkeys on Linux today is with a YubiKey. And there's a one that you can get that I think they're about $58.
Yeah.
And you buy a hardware key, and the one that they recommended is the 5C NFC, and it has a USB-C connector on it so that you can use it with your desktop, laptop, or even your cell phone. And it supports NFC for cell phones, so you don't even have to touch it to your phone. You don't have to plug it into your phone. You just have to get it near your phone to use the passkeys that you set up with. But if you're a Linux user and you want to have passkeys, the YubiKey is a good way to go. And the other way is Bitwarden, through their browser plugin, supports passkeys on Linux.
I use passkeys on a couple of my accounts, but it's a case where you have to be careful. Some are recommending that after you have set up passkey to delete your password.
No.
No, you don't want to do that. You never want to relinquish what's working, and that's your password, because it's your backup. Because sometimes things happen with passkeys, they're broken, and you got to have your password to be able to get yourself back into your account.
Yeah. Don't never delete the password. Never create a passkey and then go back and delete your back door.
I've seen a number of people recommending getting rid of the password because they think they're so bad, but that leaves them very susceptible.
Are passkeys linked to your hardware?
Pardon?
Are
They're linked to some
passkeys linked to your hardware?
Yes and no.
some form of hardware, yes.
It is and it isn't. One of the key pieces of passkey is the TPM module. because that gives an absolute ID of that machine. However, you can set up your pass keys, say on your phone, and use it with any computers that you own, okay, to get into the account.
How did those computers know what's in your phone? Or
Well,
the key that's in your phone? How do they know? It's two different environments.
It has to do with, like, you have to have the password manager, like Bitwarden, which works on everything, and it will ask you, do you want to save the pass key for this online account? Because each online account will have its own key, pass key. Okay, so bottom line is, if you're trying to get into Walgreens or CVS pharmacies, and you have the pass key set up, you can do the pass key through your phone for that drugstore, and it will take it.
Yeah, if you installed a Bitwarden plugin for your browser, it has the ability to intercept. When you go to a website and say, I want to sign up and start using a passkey. If you're on Windows and you don't have Bitwarden and you don't have KeePass, Microsoft will hijack it and tie it into the TPM in the Windows Hello. If you have Bitwarden loaded, it will recognize the website's request to start a passkey, a new passkey, and it will give you the option to store it in Bitwarden instead. So it gets replicated to your phone and your laptop and your desktop, and you have one passkey for all of your devices through Bitwarden.
Okay, so let's say you're not using Bitwarden, you're using Windows default, and Windows decides it's going to assign a passkey based off of your TPM. You're using this on a desktop. Now I'm going to my laptop, and I want to go back to that particular site that I have that passkey.
Right. You have to set up a whole nother passkey.
And I'm using a totally different machine. How does this work?
It wouldn't work.
You got to set up a whole nother passkey.
That's right. For every machine you don't use a password manager for, that's like Bitwarden in the cloud, that'll work on any of your machines. Every single device you got to set up an independent pass key for that device to each and every online account that allows a pass key to be created.
And what am I gaining by going through all this exercise?
It's high security, and it allows you to usually log into your online account quicker than just trying to use name, password, and any security that site wants to add to make sure that it really is you.
Does the use of passkeys circumvent 2FA?
It is a
No,
2FA.
It is 2FA.
Yeah.
It is 2FA.
Yes. You would use that in place of, say, a text message with a code that you got to type in. That takes longer because the speed of which the message that you are going to open up and then get out the code and type it into the machine you're on takes more time than a pass key. Just saying, yep, I want the pass key for this online account, I'm in.
Yeah, Sanford, have you ever used or set up or heard about the encryption that you can do called Pretty Good Privacy, PGP encryption?
No.
They give you a public key and a private key. And it's essentially what happens is with passkeys, the server has a certain set of information that can only be deciphered by the piece of information that you have in your key. And you kind of have to present your key and they present their key. And if they match, you get let in. If you don't match, you don't get in.
Think of it as a security deposit box in a bank. They have a key, you get a key. You lose your key, you might not be able to get into that lockbox. But
Right.
with both keys, you get whatever is in that lockbox, and then you give it back to them, and it's all locked up.
Yep.
Yeah, this brings up a problem with schemes that use physical devices like YubiKey. If you lose that YubiKey, you'd better have a second one that's been set up. And the company says always buy them in pairs.
Yes, you should buy them in pairs. They allow you and actually do support the ability to have one key be a backup key for another one.
So you're not just spending the amount per key, you're spending the amount for two keys.
Yeah.
Now, see, I have multiple Gmail accounts, which has already been talked about quite a bit. I use a YubiKey for over 20 years now, okay? I don't use the pass key, which I could use because Google really wants me to set it up. But I've already got one pass key through the YubiKey. But if I wanted to, I could set up also the pass key in all my Google accounts and have two different methods of getting in quickly to my account without using my cell phone for codes or emails sent to my email account outside of Gmail to get the code and type it all in.
Yeah. Passkeys, when you hear an introduction to them, they sound like a wonderful thing, but it's not fully developed and implemented everywhere yet.
Yeah.
And you're still going to have some passkeys and some passwords.
I have a plethora of online sites. I don't even know the exact number. And only a small number of them, relatively speaking, are offering passkeys. And some of them I do accept, some of them I do not. Like right now, I have not done so on any of my Gmail accounts. I use the YubiKey, and if you ain't got the YubiKey, you got to go through the old methods of validating that you are the owner of that Gmail account.
Yep.
Thank you.
So Sanford, does that clear things up or make you more confused?
It clears things up. In a sense, it does, because I was wondering how this would work on different platforms. And unless you're using a password manager, it sounds like you set up a passkey for each device. And once it's done, you won't get asked for 2FA.
Right. So
actually, your old F2A, if you're using, say, email or SMS text message to your other accounts or phone, then you're going to be kind of stuck in the sense that you still will have those active unless you deactivate them.
Okay,
right.
and just in case anybody's wondering, how many accounts can you set up? Passkeys, you can only set up 100 accounts per device. And OATH can only set up 64 credentials, but YubiKey can set up hundreds.
One little thing here. I'm hearing an echo, so somebody's got
somebody
an
does.
echo picking up on the mic.
Last time it was Dennis, but I'm not saying it is.
Dennis is muted at the moment.
Okay. And we're not picking up on it at the moment.
Let's see. Is it okay? That might be.
Sorry
Okay.
for the interruption.
I did have another. Are we done with this passkey topic? Good. All right. I did have a question. I didn't send this out to the group, but it is a question for the group. That is, does anyone have background information about the Xfinity cable modem Wi-Fi or cable modem router that they're sending out? The what is it? XP? think is the name of it.
Sanford, I don't know if it was at your meeting, but I think it was a CCS meeting. I gave a little presentation about how I set up my Wi-Fi on my in my new apartment.
Okay.
I upgraded my Xfinity Comcast gateway, and I outlined something like 4 different models that are currently in use by Xfinity.
Mm-hmm.
The base model is becoming obsolete. That's why they want you to upgrade. It does not do WPA3. It does not do 6 gigahertz. It does not do Wi-Fi 6, 6E. Not very well, anyway. But you also have to make sure that whatever card or fob you're using on each device can connect to Wi-Fi 6 if you want to use Wi-Fi 6. But the new gateway is also backward compatible with Wi-Fi 5, as it's called, Wi-Fi G and N and AC. And it can do AX, and BE is Wi-Fi 7. There's only 1 or 2 of their current models that can do that yet, and most of us won't need it. So that's the encapsulation of what I presented.
Okay. You know what? I don't remember which meeting that was, but yes, you did do one. Now I'll have to go back through and look through the YouTubes and find that particular one.
Or I could send you a PDF of my notes and or slides.
Whichever you would like to do, I would appreciate any.
I will make a note in my notes to do that.
Okay. The reason for the conversation is I just signed up for a new package, and they sent me their router free. They sent me their cable modem and router.
Yeah.
And I wasn't positive I wanted to use the router aspect of their device. Maybe just set it up as...
Set it up in bridge mode?
In bridge mode, which I heard works,
Yeah.
but doesn't always work.
It won't work with all of their services.
Okay.
But you will possibly notice some loss of features.
Okay. Like what? What are we talking?
I'm not sure because I don't use all their features.
Okay, I didn't know what features I'd be losing, so I thought, okay.
I think you'll still have the TV and you'll still have the basic things. If you have phone with them, you'll have that. Oh, another thing they're doing, they're moving from the wireline VoIP to their cell service, which they want you to get. They offer a certain amount for free with the gigabit plan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's free for at least 1 year. And you can use their plan or compare it with what you've got. I don't know how they are with iPhones, but they tend to favor the Samsung Galaxy types
Right.
of phones. And their service also serves as your backup. It can function as a cellular hotspot if their regular service goes out. And that's pretty much unlimited for the backup purpose. So that's another thing that they're doing. They're taking the phone service and turning it into in-house cellular. And they're taking their backup service and turning that over to cellular.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all 5G.
Right.
Because 5G theoretically can penetrate buildings, but really they set it up so you have 5G hotspot indoors and you have 5G service for outdoors. If you do it that way.
Okay.
If you don't use their cell service, you're a little bit more on your own. So check and see whether your replacement gateway will allow whatever services you're using.
Yeah. Which I'm only purchasing the internet aspect of it and nothing else. So
Okay.
I don't see me losing anything. No phones, no TV, no. It's all just internet is all I'm getting.
Yeah, and the other thing I did was I separated the bands into their own virtual networks so that I could require WPA3 on Wi-Fi 6.
Okay.
6 gigahertz, I mean. That's just so that, well, you have to have it 6 gigahertz. It is a requirement. It won't do anything below WPA3.
Right.
And that's where you may need to upgrade some of your equipment. that connects to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas if you use the 5 gigahertz band, you can require WPA3 there, or you can allow WPA2, WPA3. Don't allow anything below that.
I also was reading that by default, their public access network is turned on.
It is.
And you need to go in and turn that off if you don't want the public to be able to use your network to be able to get back onto
Yeah.
Xfinity. This is, I guess, the place where many people steal your signal.
No.
This is what I read on Reddit. That's all.
No, you must, they're wrong. You can only access the public facing Wi-Fi if you have a Comcast logon
Right.
and a password or passkey or 2FA, which they prefer.
Right.
And without it, if you're not a subscriber, you get bupkis.
Yeah. It won't let you in.
Okay, so you are a subscriber, but you still can use somebody else's Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Well,
like if you're outdoors and you
It's
suddenly
not
need
treated
it.
as your Wi-Fi at that point because it's outside your internal network.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah, like, for
it's
example,
the same as if you set up on any network in a home a guest account for people who come to your house.
This I
such as
understand.
relatives.
Right. This I understand. Drew, you want to add?
Yeah, like, for example, if I go to my mechanic, he's an Xfinity business customer, and I'm an Xfinity home user. And when I go into his shop, my phone automatically connects up to his router without me needing to do anything. And I can get access to the internet through his system because that's how Comcast wants you to do it. You don't. That's something that most people don't know that they can turn off.
For home users, it's simple, but it gets more complicated for business users because they can set up multiple access points, etc., and multiple networks and subnets.
Mm-hmm.
So when
Yeah.
you're using public Wi-Fi, it very seldom is the same thing as this. Although in a small business, maybe it is.
Yeah, I get better service, better throughput going through my cellular. I turn off the Wi-Fi when I go there because I get better service through my phone.
Yeah, the public-facing Comcast by default is slow, and public networks tend to be that way too. And they're not very safe either.
So, yeah, that's
Almost
something you have to
every-
be careful of.
Almost every public network, some way or another, listens in on traffic.
Mhm.
And that includes your Bluetooth as a possibility also because it's a radio. Only NFC has such a short range that it is somewhat safe. But if somebody bumps up next to you in line at a checkout, they might get your information through the NFC.
Yeah, yeah. You could pay for somebody else's groceries.
Yeah, it's not common, but it can happen.
I turn off NFC every time I use it and turn it back on again. It's a pain in the tuchus, but I turn it on and off before and after each transaction.
Right.
That's the best way to do it. But
Yeah.
most people don't do it that way. And there was even something in the last couple months about the fact that people were using their smartphone to tap a gas pump. And the gas pump was stealing information and giving it to somebody that was nearby to pick up the information and commit fraud at your expense.
Yeah.
Okay. New topic, new direction? Yes, Dennis. Dennis has something.
This is real quick. Months back, we were talking about where to get the safely download the Macrium Reflect Free Edition 8. What what website were we talking about? Did anybody remember?
There's quite a few sites that have a copy of it. You got Major Geeks, Softronics, and a couple others.
Okay.
Not
Major
thinking.
Geeks is the one that I use.
Yeah,
Major
Major
Geek,
Geeks
okay.
and Softronics, another one. There's a third one that I sometimes use also that almost all of them have it in their repository.
Okay. Thanks. Let me mute again.
That was a good question.
Also, if you have Unigit UI, you might be able to find it.
All right. All right, so the next item that I had, let me just copy this and put this in the chat, is a discussion about end of life. And I'm not talking about ours because once we're gone, we're gone.
Resources.
But it has to do with end of life of hardware as well as software, but more of hardware. So the question comes is, what do we do with our hardware that's coming to the end of its life or at the end of life? And how do we move on from there? Tim?
Are you talking like Windows, old hardware that doesn't support Windows 11, Chromebooks, and Apple Macs, etc.? Are you talking those?
Yeah, it would be those, of course, you can, yes, those that are no longer viable to use and be repurposed for something else. So what do you do with the end of life?
I repurpose a lot of them.
Okay.
I got it galore. I mean, I got a couple old Macs. I got Chromebooks galore. I've got lots of old equipment. I put Linux on them, and if I think they're good enough, I will put a unsupported version of Windows 11 on it, and it works just fine. But it's also debloated.
What do you do with the hardware that you're not going to load something on it?
For that, if you're not going to do that kind of a thing, then you only got two choices. One, you can sell it like on eBay as an individual person, and you got to disclose anything you know that's got a problem with it. The other is you can give it to a charitable organization like Goodwill, even Salvation Army. You can also do the third option, and that is get it to a recycler. The recycler will tear it apart. Anything that he thinks is of value, he will then try and resell himself on eBay or other markets like it. And anything that's technically garbage or cannot be sold in a certain amount of time gets all ground down, and they'll recover any gold that's in any of the material.
Right.
Has anyone tried to recover gold off of their processors or stuff?
No, but
I
I've
see
got
Dennis laughing over there. Dennis, come on.
I've got a lot of processors in a bag here. I'm not kidding, but most of them are live processors, but they're too old for most anything I would want to use them on.
Dennis, did you want to reflect on that? Did you try doing this?
No, but I'm just wondering, are there any statistics or info on how much gold is in an old?
More than you think. And bottom line, with a value of gold, what it is, believe me, it doesn't take much, and you got quite a bit of money. And that's not a joke.
No, considering that gold is now at $5,000 an ounce.
Yeah, that means now take an ounce, and this is a solid material. You got so many grams of weight for the 1 ounce, and take that number. If you get just 1 gram of gold, you got quite a bit of money there. It's not chump change.
No. So I looked it up online to see how much gold could be found in them, and they said the processors between 1980 and 1990 had between 0.1 to 0.5 grams of gold. The old processors, like a Pentium Pro, may have up to 1 gram. So if that helps to give you an idea how much is in there, you figure if you got a tenth of a gram, I don't know what that's worth.
This also applies to any cards that get plugged in because they got gold on the contacts. You got GPUs that a lot of people use. Plenty of gold in there too. So it depends upon what the item is as to how much gold is there. But it's more
so
than we
online
give
it says a tenth of a gram of 24 karat gold would be worth about $15.
Yeah.
Now you take what a recycling center goes through in old junked equipment. They actually melt down and create their own ingots of gold.
Right. Drew?
Yeah, we have another thing that you can do is look for a local user group that does refurbishing. The group I belong to here in Sarasota has a separate division called the Refurb Shop. We actually have rented retail space in Sarasota where we have a shop where there's about 8 or 10 guys that work volunteer. We take in laptops and computers from the schools. Every time the Sarasota County schools get rid of their laptops, they give them to us. And we have a relationship with Microsoft where we're allowed to put a free copy of Windows and Office on our refurbed computers. We wipe them out, we clean them up, we buy parts for them, we have power cords. We actually just this month crossed the 25,000 marker of refurbished computers that we have taken in and then redistributed to the needy.
CCS used to have that kind of a program, but it's been more than 2 decades since we disbanded that. It was okay for a while. It was up in Chicago, and a bunch of volunteers did that as well.
Right. Dennis?
Well, I used to watch Pawn Stars quite a bit on the History Channel or whatever, and I never remember anybody bringing in a handful of chips or processors to say, how much will you give me for them? So where are you going to sell it once you have it?
No, you got to sell that stuff to the recyclers because it requires grinding them down first and then putting them in a solution that extracts gold by dissolving it. And then you get rid of the garbage, and then you have a way of taking the absorbed gold and turning it into a solid, which then all gets melted down and made into ingots.
Yeah, so when you're done, you owe them money.
Well,
There's also
Dennis,
chemicals.
to reflect back to, if I may, Dennis, to reflect back to the show that you're referring to, those shows were produced over a decade ago when gold was not as valuable as it is today. Gold being up to $5,000. Back then, gold was only $1,000 an ounce or less. So walking into a porn shop,
Somebody
got
do
me
that.
on that one. I don't think they'd be interested in it. Even if you walked into a pawn shop today, would they want to buy the gold that's in the processors? No, it's not their thing that I know of. Now,
It
maybe
costs too much money for them to get it out.
Right.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to go and do the work to get it out and run the chemistry. But it is worth it to do if you're willing to put the time in, because
Most
Yeah.
$15 a processor adds up pretty quick.
most of it
Yeah.
is done only by the recyclers. They are trying to grind up the plastics to be able to take less space in landfills. They take the recyclable materials like the aluminum, steel, and other metals that are in there and recycle them out. Well, they're going to do that for the gold too. So they're already set up chemistry wise and crunching down the material into granular form to apply the chemistry to recover a lot of the materials. Now, with furious metals, they just use a magnet, period. With aluminum, they can't do that. It's got to be picked out by hand, and by and large, the copper that's usually used, they also have to, in most cases, pick that out by hand to be able to recycle the majority of it. A little bit might be plating on aluminum, and they might use something like chemical absorption like they do with the gold recovery.
Now, there is a lot of gold, there's a lot of gold on the edge connectors used, like on memory cards, PCI cards, anything that plugs into your slots on your machine. I don't remember the slot that they go in. I think there's gold on the end of those contacts too.
Yeah.
So it's not just the processor, it's the motherboard itself has got a lot of gold on
That's
there. So there is a good amount to be had if you're willing to put the time in and have the chemicals to do it. Hydrochloric acid being one of them to start with, but then you got to work with the other chemicals to precipitate it out. But there's money to be made.
Oh, that's why a lot of recycling centers pop up in just about every state, simply because you can make a great deal of money while doing a service, and that doesn't include all the parts, components that they salvage out of your garbage to resell them, because when it comes to a computer, those parts are worth more than the whole unit itself. The whole unit might you might be able to pick up for $50 if you pick it up directly. But the components within there that are still reusable by other people, either to repair an existing system or to build another system, they end up with a lot of money made from those component parts that exceed that $50 you would pay for the whole unit. Not a joke.
Got it. Anyone else want to comment on recycling their old equipment? What do you guys do with it?
Well, I had a Chromebook that I used for a long time with Linux, but now it's become too slow to be even useful for taking notes at meetings, and one of its ports just died. So I'm going to take the internal storage, which is a small chip. I'll somehow destroy that, and the rest is e-waste.
The rest you're going to take to a recycling center?
Funny thing,
You just take it into like a Best Buy or Staples or somebody like that.
yeah.
Okay.
They'll
Yeah.
take it.
Most
I'll
of them
take it.
now have a program to take in your stuff. They may give you a store credit to buy other things from them.
Yeah. Usually when I get rid of things, they're useless to other people.
That's usually the point, is to that point. One of the reason I asked is because I do have an old PC that I finally decided to lay to rest, and I started stripping out the components and looking at it and going, oh, this stuff would have been worth something to somebody.
Well,
But
see, that's absolutely true. And for example, in a laptop, one of the things that might be of some value, but you got to go through the effort of salvaging it and trying to sell it, is the display screen. People are breaking those screens like crazy. So those who know how to do the repair, they're looking for the cheapest replacement screen they can get their hands on. And that keeps the cost of repairs down to just their labor and a little bit for the replacement screen that you may be providing.
right. But I guess that like on desktops, having one that's going to be that's too old, that doesn't have TPM in there, TPM2, just means that you're stuck in the Linux world or some other OS to make it work and make it worthwhile.
Yeah. Yes.
And because that's a limited market, in terms of visibility, there's not as many people out there that want to use that. That device then therefore should be recycled. Bert?
Yeah.
Bert?
Yeah, you're all missing the boat.
Yes.
What we're also doing is taking everything apart and putting it in a frame and make it work. I mean, when you think about it, you got all kinds of parts you can put in different places. I mean, or just looking at a laptop itself broken up into pieces in a frame.
You mean like a picture?
Yeah.
Piece of
And
artwork?
not only
Yeah.
that, but you can take and now, mind you, at the moment, it's more expensive than you want to deal with. But you can get from Chinese companies an interface that goes to that display screen that allows you to use it as a secondary screen for any computer, desktop or even a laptop. There are reuses that you can use. Even let's say that you said you had a laptop. If it has a spinning hard drive, that thing may still be working just fine, and you can use it as secondary storage for any of the computers you still have, even if you have the absolute latest version of computer hardware. It's good for long-term storage, especially for a 2.5-inch drive, which might be in that old laptop. Get a USB housing, 2.5-inch drive, drop the hard drive in there, put the top back on it, plug it into any computer, and you can blank that, and then use it for backing up various documents or computer OS installations.
Thank you.
There's lots of uses.
Okay, so what do we do with our old software?
Old software, really
Delete?
anymore. You're talking. I might have a few old software packages, that came off of a shelf, and has CDs. Maybe even it had floppy disks, 3.5-inch. It's all garbage now. So therefore, I would take any manuals, if I don't need them, toss them into the recycling bin along with the box that it came in. The plastic CD DVDs, I don't think they're of any real value. I'm not certain they're recyclable. They might or might not be.
I've not seen them to be recyclable
the
yet.
same thing. They're basically not recyclable that I know of.
Let's see.
And as far as other old software that we downloaded from wherever, you just erase it and it's gone.
Yep.
Online, I asked AI, are DVDs recyclable? And they said technically they are, but they can't be placed in your standard recycle bin.
Ah,
They're made of number 7 polycarbonate plastic, which requires a special processing through electronics recyclers. So there are places that will take it, but not your general e-waste place will take them.
Yeah,
You'd have
in
to
other
check
words,
your local.
if you got a place where you can take old computers for recycling purposes, that's where you take the CDs also, based
Yeah.
upon what you just said.
Okay. Cloud. I'm looking at my discussions that I'd sent out. And one had to do with cloud dependencies. Let's see what this is.
I'm heavily dependent on clouds.
Okay. See, now that might be a good topic here.
Well, the other factor in cloud dependency, both business and individual, we've had for some reason a lot of outages in the last few months. Some of it, I'm positive, is weather related because of snow and ice storms, but not all of it. A lot of it is also doing screwball things that the service provider has done to their own equipment that has brought things down. And this even includes for cell phone companies.
Right.
Verizon was the last one I remember
Yeah,
having
yeah.
a problem.
Yeah. Verizon was out not that long ago.
Yeah.
This also is just in this discussion here has to do with if you depend on the cloud to store your photos and your files, and that becomes unavailable, or you suddenly get notification that that site is shutting down and you got to pull all your stuff off. How do you handle this?
Well, that's two factors there. There is a third factor, and that is with a lot of people I've seen, mostly with Microsoft's cloud, Azure, they have lost people's information, and in some cases cannot recover it. So you got that as a
Yeah.
third factor.
Drew, you have any experience?
I solved the problem by using multiple cloud providers. On my cell phone, if I take a picture or a video or a screenshot, it automatically gets uploaded to Google Photos through the Android Google Photos app. I have a pCloud account, and I have the pCloud software installed on my phone, and it automatically uploads photos to the pCloud drive. And I have my Microsoft OneDrive software set up to upload new photos to my Microsoft account. So as soon as I snap a picture, I have 3 copies of it.
Another thing to think about, and this is what big businesses do, how far that goes down the chain to small businesses, I don't know. But many businesses, they don't rely upon one ISP. They usually have at least 2, and they come from different directions. The hope is if one goes out, that's the primary, the backup works, and they keep doing their business. Even if it slows down some, it's still in business. Those
Drew,
that don't do 2 accounts, they are out of business until the service comes back.
Drew, you mentioned how your photo is copied across 3 different online accounts.
Yes.
How do you get to view them? You have to
Well,
manually go in, or do they show up someplace?
Well, if I take a picture with my phone, I can immediately go into Google Photos on any device and see it.
Okay.
If I'm sitting in front of my Windows computer, which I'm doing most often, it's automatically uploaded to my OneDrive. So if I take a picture or a screen capture with my phone in Windows, I just go into File Explorer and navigate to my OneDrive Pictures folder, and it's there seconds later. I use Google. I pay for Google storage and I pay for Microsoft storage, and I own in perpetuity pCloud storage. So I have free file sync at night while I'm sleeping, is copying all of the new and changed documents and files and things from Google and Microsoft over to pCloud. So I have pCloud is my backup for my cloud. So if Google goes down or I can't get to Google, I can get it off of pCloud. If Microsoft goes down, I can get it off pCloud.
Sounds like you worked out a solution there.
Yeah, and it's also the way he's doing it is automation. Let the computer do the work, not you.
Right.
Oh, and iCloud has backup stuff too from your phone.
And
iCloud
so
what? Is that iCloud you said? That's the
iCloud has its
Apple.
own your Apple phone, its own backup to iCloud.
And that,
But the iCloud only gives you a finite amount of storage to
Right.
do that with.
but if he takes and automates the iCloud access to also make a copy on Google's G Drive and also on P Drive, etc., then it's all automated, and he can even remove it from the iCloud so that the limited amount of space isn't a factor. Same with people using OneDrive that only get the free version, which is only 5 GB. If that's very limiting, especially if you're also doing backups of your Windows system to OneDrive, even for one folder. So
Yep.
bottom line is, once you take it and back it up to other storage locations that might be cheaper and more voluminous in space, you can then remove it from the limited storage space. All automated. You don't
Yeah,
touch it
and
once it's set
there's
up.
there's a website that I have an account at called Mult Cloud, MULT Cloud, and I through little doodads here and there accumulated I think 30 gigabytes a month of transfer credit, and you can go in there and say, I would like to synchronize my documents folder on OneDrive to my documents folder on pCloud, and it does it automatically for you in the background. And you don't have to do any, you don't even have to touch it. You go into Google Drive and you create a new document, it lands on pCloud automatically through MultCloud.
Multi-cloud with love. Get 50 gigabytes free.
Don't
File
get
transfer
too
credit.
excited, Sanford, you're married.
I know. Hey, you're right. Don't get excited. Multi-cloud to-go choice for cloud-to-cloud data transfer. So this is what you would use in between as an in-between guy?
This does work for me in the background. Yeah, I have automated routines that run at pre-scheduled times and transfer files from one cloud account to the other.
And the thing is, if you're a person like I am with just a limited number of my computers, they stay on all the time. So you could schedule this all when you're asleep in bed.
How much is
What's that, Dennis?
how much is it, Drew? Yeah.
I have been using them long enough that I don't pay them anything. I mean, for the data that I transfer, if I need to go over you get 5 GB today. They're showing you 5 GB of data every month.
Right.
I've been on there long enough that I've accumulated credit. So I have 30 GB of data traffic per month. And I don't ever use 30 GB of traffic per month. So I don't pay them anything.
Oh, so because it's not an actual storage location, they're talking about how much data you're moving from through their system.
They charge you for what you transfer.
Okay.
They don't host the cloud. They don't host your data. They're your backup program. They're the program. They're the website that checks your cloud drives for new and updated and changed files, and copies them to wherever you want them to be.
Backup and restore between clouds. And you could save all your emails as PDFs.
Why not? It's a kind of a cloud account to start with if you're
Sure.
using web-based versus a local client base. Like Thunderbird and Outlook Classic. Those are client-based desktop email clients.
Wow, that's got a lot of online storage that it works with.
Yes.
So do you have to give them your logins, passwords to your various clouds, or no?
Yeah, you have to authenticate to your cloud providers. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're using two-factor authentication on those accounts, well, you got to provide that information also. In other words, they've got to be able to access those online cloud accounts as easy as if they were you in front of the computer accessing it. So you have to be a little cautious, but in some instances, you might be able to create a secondary login to some of these accounts, but not all of them. And that way you can give them the secondary account to get in and transfer the stuff around. But I'd be leery of giving them the primary.
Bear with me in responding to one of our members. Can't seem to find the link for tonight's meeting. Sorry if I'm distracted here.
Who is it?
Harry.
Harry's been showing up every few days at the wrong times of meetings.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why he logs on and, and then doesn't connect because it's not the time of the meeting.
Send this to him. Okay. Done.
Maybe he's not getting the email messages.
Yeah, maybe he must not have gotten the link and could have been relying on a link from last year because the passkeys change. But anyways, next thing, what do I have for a subject here? Next subject that I had was similar to something earlier, owning versus renting software, basically on a subscription basis. The merits and reasons to want to do one over the other.
Well, there's also the third, freeware.
Well, that's not part of this discussion. This only has to do with owning versus renting software.
Well,
As in the case in years past, we used to be able to buy Microsoft Office. Now it's a rental only for the most part. I
subscription.
don't know if they have a retail package of Office anymore. Is there? Anyone know?
They
Yeah,
still have,
I own Office 21.
Okay.
They had one they called their final that they sold a couple years back. They wanted like $250 for it. They weren't going to update it. You just bought it. That may have been the final one.
there was
Mhm.
21, and I think there's a 25 version that were installable versions.
Okay. So the thing is, what is the reason, the merits behind owning versus renting?
Renting or a subscription, as you're really alluding to, means that
Right. It's a
it means
subscription
that you
base.
you have to go online to use that software, and then they keep it all up to date with the latest bug fixes, security patches, it's new features, etc.,
Right.
all automatically. Whereas with owned versions of software, you have a situation where you may, for a period of time, get updates, but it may not begin to have enough of the updates that are available in the online subscription
Yeah.
service. And
Yeah.
Actually,
you'll also
retail
have a delay.
versions don't get updates. They don't get
Yeah.
new
So
features.
if you
They
subscribe to
used to give
Microsoft
updates. I don't know if they still do on
Hold on,
like
we got three people talking over each other. Bert, you wanted to say?
The retail version, the latest system that they have, does not get any new features for the time you buy. It may get security, but it doesn't get any new features.
Right.
The online versions get new features, and so you have to understand what it is you're buying.
Right.
Okay.
So
Drew, you were going to add?
if you look at Microsoft's model, if you want cloud storage from Microsoft, they offer 5 for free, 100 for $20, or a terabyte for $100. Those are your three choices. And the $100 plan comes with Microsoft Office. So you might as well, if you need that much cloud storage, you might as well go with Microsoft 365 as a subscription.
right.
Okay.
If you need that cloud storage. Now, I don't need that much cloud storage from Microsoft, and I don't want to pay them $100 a year. So I paid $40 for a one-time purchase of Office 365 2021, and I get secure. I still get patches and fixes to the existing apps, but the apps themselves don't update or change anymore. And as long as you don't care, I don't. The current version, the 2026 version of Microsoft Word, doesn't do anything that the 21 doesn't do, other than AI. If what you're looking for is a word processor on the cheap, get a $40 package and keep it for 10 years.
It depends upon each person's real needs. Now, if you're in a business, a lot of the businesses use the Microsoft Office because it's a stable base. You can do nearly anything you could ever want to with it, but it also means that they have to be careful when they're creating documents that have to go to the public, such as in an investment company, the document they create for the investor has to be usable and readable on that person's system. Years ago, they didn't take that into account. So college kids coming into that company were using all the gee whiz features they could think of doing, and then find out a lot of the people who were getting documents couldn't do anything with them. They were unusable. And then they finally started wising up and saying, we got to pare down what goes outside of business to business documentation. So the end result was nowadays, especially retired people, they don't need Office. There are so few of them that would use a fraction of what's available. They need more sensible suites of Office type applications for writing up their own documents, personal correspondence, and stuff like that. Their own spreadsheet. Very few would touch doing a presentation through like PowerPoint or something comparable to that. So the end result is the now removed WordPad as of Windows 11 2024 was a minimal, realistic word processor for the average person who doesn't need a Microsoft Office application, whether it's loaded onto their local machine or if it's loaded up through MS65 in the Azure account.
Yeah.
And even with the MS365, you have an offline mode. So if you can't connect to Microsoft's Azure account, you can keep doing your work. It's saved locally. And when the connection comes back to Microsoft's Azure account, it'll all get synced up accordingly. You just can't do collaborative work that you some people have to do in businesses with other people on documents, spreadsheets, etc. And till that connectivity comes back.
Sanford, when you send out an email with this meeting notice, it's before we send it out, it has to get converted back into Microsoft 365 because there are some features that are built in which need to get updated because there used to be other graphics. Various graphics worked before that aren't in the systems you're using.
And I just threw into the chat a link where you can get WordPad that you can install on your Windows 11.
Hey, if you got Windows 10 or 23H2 Windows 11 and prior, you've already got a copy of WordPad. There's, I think, 3 files. You copy them out, you stick them into a folder in the same basic location in Windows 11 24H2, 25H2, and it works, period. I've been doing that for quite a while.
Yeah, I have a program called WinArrow Tweaker, and WinArrow Tweaker has inside the app links to classic versions of software.
Yeah. But I didn't bother doing that. I already had, I got 10 here out the wazoo. I got 23 H2 still running. They all have WordPad. I just copied it out to a flash drive into a little folder on the flash drive. And I just copy those files into any 24H2 or 25H2 and beyond. I've still got it.
As long as you know how to do that. I give this link to people who don't know anything about computers.
Well,
good point. Good point.
That's true too. There are other substitutes as well for like WordPad, but WordPad years and years ago, more than a decade ago, they incorporated in a simplistic package some but limited features of actual Word into the WordPad, making it a more versatile, usable piece of software. but they decided with 24H2 and on, they're not going to support it. So they removed it.
I also have seen lately that when you take a Word document that was made from an older file, you save it into OneDrive, it converts it at the time. It gives you a message that it's upgrading the file to more current formats as it saves it into OneDrive.
So I pulled up the link to this WordPad, and I see here that it gives you a sublink to get to WordPad installer.
What is? Oh, you had your mouse over it, and it started
Yep.
showing down the bottom
Oh,
left
I'm
corner.
sorry. I did, and sorry. Where'd it go? Back up. Mm-hmm. Oops, sorry,
There it
my
is.
fingers are fast.
Right there. Oop, back up. Back up. It said follow. Go down further.
I think it's down further.
Yeah.
Download
Right there.
WordPad
It says
for right
following
down here.
website. Following website in blue type.
Yeah.
Now it shows
Okay.
down over there. It's Win7. Oops. Win7games.com/WordPad is where it's going.
Yeah. Win7 Games is good too. That has I play the old fashioned Hearts and Solitaire and things like that.
So you would download it right from this site.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's basically the same thing as what I'm doing. You've only got one little tiny folder and two files. One's the exe of a WordPad. That's it. And you go into programs, files in under Windows. You scroll down to Windows NT and expand that, and you'll see accessories, I think it was, something like that. And that's where you dump the files for WordPad. That's it. And then you have to create a shortcut to execute the exe that you put somewhere like on your desktop or on your taskbar or some other location to easily access and execute the WordPad. But you can also take the Microsoft search feature, type in WordPad, and once it's indexed, it would find WordPad executable and allow you to launch it right there. But I prefer the shortcuts.
Okay.
And once that's the other thing. Even after you copied them and pasted them into the right location, you can just double click WordPad exe. It brings it up. You can see it open on your taskbar. Right click that and say pin to the taskbar. Done. You don't even have to create a shortcut. It did it for you. Any program you can open up in Windows will show up some kind of an icon on your taskbar. If you right click that icon, you can select pin this to the taskbar, and you can use your mouse pointer with a left mouse button, hold down on that icon, and move it anywhere on the taskbar you want it. This is a standard feature that's been around as long as 10 and probably 8 and 7. I'm not sure about Vista. I don't remember enough about Vista.
Yeah, Vista was a fly by the night.
Yeah, well, it was a good thing too.
And so to reflect on Vista, since you brought it up, I mentioned that it was a PC that I was disassembling and going to be getting rid of. When I fired it up to check it out, it was running Vista. It was
Woo!
that old.
Yeah.
I
I
came
go,
across one 2 years back of mine that was still running Vista, which I got rid of real quick.
yeah.
Yeah. I had a Windows Vista machine once for necessity. I was doing software support and I needed to have Vista to run the software.
There was some compatibility things that Vista did that went away right after Vista.
Well,
And I
that
don't remember what they were, but there were
Vista
some
was rejected.
softwares didn't run after Vista.
Vista was rejected so badly. Only Millennium was worse at the time. That forced them to create a stripped down version called Windows 7, which became also a Windows 7 SP1 in the final version. Then you went to Windows 8.0, then 8.1, then to 10, and you had umpteen different variations, just like we're getting in Windows 11.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Next topic that I sent out here is keeping under the subject of new or used and refurbished, talking about purchasing used and refurbished hardware.
Refurbished,
Tim, you like to flip your hardware. I'm assuming you sell it.
refurbished hardware is usually the most desired of the used equipment because somebody has tech skills, has gone over the whole thing. They cleaned it up a lot, and it's usable when you get it. When you're buying used, you are the tech. You have to test it out when you receive it to make sure what is working, what isn't working, and if what you find not working is not stated in the sale ad, you can try and get additional money back to your account. I've had to do that a couple times, but it doesn't work in all cases because some of the eBay sellers right now are saying, here's an item, it costs this much shipping, if any, and besides your state sales tax, and there are no returns. In which case, unless it's a very egregious kind of a problem, the only way they can do it is get some credit back, and PayPal, if you use that, will help you get some of that money back. But it's a hit and miss proposition.
eBay does have a guarantee, though, and that if you got sold a bill of goods, they'll stand behind it and give you a refund.
Yes,
eBay does.
yes. Now, here's the thing. I recently acquired a computer, cheap, by the way. The person stated that he really didn't know much about computers, apparently. He got three short, 4 long beeps, and that's all he got. That's all he knew. I bought it because I know what that is. It means you got a power problem. This uses a brick laptop type power supply. He didn't use a 90-watt power supply. He used probably a 65 or a 45-watt power supply. That's why he got the beeps and no screen. Whereas I automatically hooked it up to a 90 and got full screen. But one thing he didn't specify in the sales ad because he didn't get it up and running was the fact that the BIOS were locked with a password. Fortunately, I was able to correct that, and I have a full functioning unit. But I had bought it in part for the CPU that's supposed to be in that unit. I wanted to check out something on that particular CPU. But I knew if I didn't like that CPU, what I could put in its place and make a viable unit out of it. Turns out it didn't have the CPU chip he said it had. It had the one that I would have used in place of that chip. So I got a system for about 1/3 the value that I bought it for. Because it really is worth 2 to 3 times what I bought it for.
So since you buy used equipment, what do you use? How do you mitigate the risk of purchasing a used piece of equipment? Let's say you bought a laptop or a PC. You're meeting up with this guy, now what?
You have to know first what it is you're looking for in general, such as what's the size of the screen, what's its resolution, such as 720p, 1080p, 1440p.
Well, that would be part of the shopping experience. I'm looking at what would you do to protect yourself on purchasing the hardware?
I always do bottom fishing. I'm looking for the lowest price because I am a techie person. I know what I'm doing with the gear, and I haven't been seriously burnt ever. Going back, the very first ones I bought were 3 laptops broken, and I took the 3 laptops and scavenged parts off of one and made the other 2 whole and usable. And that goes back into the 1990s.
So how do you make sure the hardware is okay?
You can't. Not unused.
Do you go and fire it up when you go to buy it?
No, because I'm doing it online. I have to trust what the seller is saying, that they show the pictures of the screen at least showing the BIOS, if nothing else. And they may sell it without memory and without storage, but usually with the CPU. But occasionally it's bare bones. You don't even get the CPU. You're buying just the motherboard, and they say they tested it out. Okay, if it gets to you and it doesn't work, you may be able to go back and get your money back. And usually they won't have you ship it back.
Okay, Dennis?
Would that be from eBay you're getting it, Tim, or is that Salvation Army website that you
That's through eBay. Now, through Salvation Army, it's buyer beware on that. They have nobody to do any testing. Shopping at Goodwill, they usually do some testing on some of the stuff, but not all of it. So it's sold as is at a lower price. So you can be taking a gamble there. But I just saw one on Salvation Army, and this person bought a box of 31 Apple devices, which included smartphones. And 5 of them had active functionality. And 3 out of the 5 had active SIM cards. But he first took them to the police station to try and get them back to the owners, and the police said they couldn't do anything with it. And he tried on his own time and effort to try and find out who the owner was to get it back to them, and that didn't work out either. So about the only thing you can do in a situation like that, it becomes e-waste to be ground up. But he did take 2 of those units that were on T-Mobile to a T-Mobile store. They took out the SIM card and trashed it. Okay. So now you have a phone that works, so to speak. If they could do a factory reset, theoretically anybody could use it at that point in time, as long as the IMEI number wasn't blacklisted. Other than that, it's junk. And with Salvation Army, the proceeds of the sales help other people in training them. But a lot of the people are lower echelons. And so the end result is some of that stuff might have been stolen property. He even had these portable games, 4 of them in all. 2 of them worked out, and together, conservatively, he might be able to resell them for $325. The other 2 were junk. They didn't work, period. He also got a Apple, it's a cylinder, looks like a trash can.
Okay. This is individual stuff. So let's
do that too.
continue on the subject of purchasing, the pros and cons of purchasing used equipment or refurbished equipment. And I want to discuss, there's also a lot of enterprise equipment that's available out there because enterprise companies are always turning over their hardware.
Right.
And they're going to be selling off their racks of PCs or their big storage of PCs. If you go on Craigslist, you'll see lots of listings out there of, 25 PCs that someone's got to sell, or a whole bunch of hard drives, different sizes that they've collected. Is this a good place to go and buy stuff?
Personally, no. Craigslist has a very bad reputation. You're taking a gamble with your own life unless you meet in a police station to make the sale.
Well, that could be with any online purchase that you do in person.
There is fraud.
Even Facebook Marketplace has the same issues, whether it's Craigslist or wherever. That is
you've also got that
caveat of doing the process.
You've got.
We're not talking. We're got to hone in on the hardware.
But the Walmart and Amazon have that problem too with some of the sellers. But you're not putting your life in your hands. You are either getting what you asked for and paid for, or you didn't. And in some cases, you may get help, but you got to look on Amazon and Walmart. Is this an item they are selling, or is it a third-party seller? If it's a third-party seller, it absolves Walmart and Amazon from intervening with anything on your behalf. And now you, the only thing the only thing you've got left at that point is if you used a credit card, the credit card company may help you, or PayPal may help you.
Okay. Bert, you wanted to say? Oh, he disappeared.
I have a delivery from Walmart coming in right now, so I have to leave.
Okay. Bye-bye, Bert. Walmart. Okay. So one of the ways that I would make sure that a piece of hardware would work is I would bring up whatever connected device it's supposed to connect to and attempt to fire it up while I'm reviewing the product in front of the person.
If you're in a brick and mortar place or with an individual that you trust that is not a criminally minded person, yes, you can do that.
Yeah,
but when you
never know if the person's criminally minded, no matter how they look.
Well, that's why I also
you can never tell by a book by its cover. A person could look in a 3-piece suit and a red tie, and he's going to steal everything from you.
That's why all law enforcement tell you if you're going to do something like Craigslist, do it at the police station, local police station, and no ifs, ands, or buts. Otherwise, you could be robbed, you could be killed.
Understood. Let's keep the negativity down. So
it's a fact.
But I'm kind of Tim, I want to focus on the hardware and not the ramifications of getting.
But like I said, the best thing is I do my purchases online through eBay and even Goodwill through PayPal. Bottom line, they give me the reassurance if I run into a problem, they're going to help me out either to get a satisfactory resolution with the seller and or a total refund, because they sit on, especially PayPal, sits on the money of the sale for 45 days. If you get the merchandise and you test it out and you got a problem and you're under the 45-day limit, odds are you're going to get the money back if they can't get accommodations with the seller.
Okay.
And with a credit card, if you do that directly, you have to get with a credit card company, and you may have them at the same time do something like PayPal to try and get a hold of the seller to try and get satisfaction or refund you.
Has anyone bought hardware online?
Yeah, tons of it.
Okay. Dennis, have you?
Oh,
Or Drew?
I don't know if it works yet, but I took my car in to have it detailed at a detail shop, and they sprayed something on my dashboard and broke my radio.
Ooh.
And the radio in my car controls the Bluetooth, the navigation, the menu system, the whole friggin' ball of wax. And Lexus wanted almost $7,000 for a new radio.
Wait, how'd they ruin your radio?
They must have sprayed some kind of chemicals on the dashboard.
Okay.
And
Sorted it out.
the detailer, what we did is I got an estimate from Lexus, and they printed out in the document the actual model number of the radio, and we found out that there were 2 or 3 companies that made radios for Lexus, and we found the specific one. And the detailer went up to eBay and bought a used radio for about $350. And the first one that came in damaged. So that one he sent back and purchased a different one. And right now I'm just waiting for a mechanic to actually put it in the dashboard. So we'll see.
Okay. Anyone else buy stuff online? No one? I mean, like Tim, I bought many of things online, and even a lot of used products too. Hard drives and all kinds of equipment over all the years. I've had minimal problems, just a rarity that I'll find something that did not work as advertised. But for the most part, everything has been pretty good. Even purchasing on Craigslist in person, I've had no issues with it whatsoever on any of the purchases I've ever made. But I always make sure that I take steps to protect myself. That is, doing it in a public place or a police station parking lot or something like that. But when it comes to the hardware itself, you often need to bring power with you, maybe a laptop if it's a peripheral or something to plug it into to make sure it works. I try to test it if I can, if I'm meeting somebody in person. I like to test it before I buy it, or at least turn it on and make sure it turns on and works, no matter what it could be.
Yeah,
It's tricky.
I once replaced a really low-powered tablet with it was basically a used version of the same thing. The first one quit, and the one that I bought online was just fine for a while. It probably could have used a new battery, but that's about it. And I also obtained parts for my Chromebook online. And those are all pulled from old Chromebooks.
Sure.
And all that seems to have worked out pretty well. So, yeah, it is possible to get some nice stuff.
Okay.
And the prices are usually
Sure.
pretty reasonable when
Usually
you get
pretty
down
reasonable.
to older stuff and it's out of support and you're buying parts for it
Yeah.
and it's no
Yeah,
longer
I
getting the
mean-
Chrome updates.
You have
Yeah,
to
I mean,
remember.
I'll be thrilled if my $350 radio replaces a $7,000 radio.
You have to remember that A, we're in a throwaway economy, and B, the vast majority of people don't fix anything. If it doesn't work or it doesn't work well enough for them, they get rid of it and get something else that makes them happier. But that means too that older equipment, if it's not too badly damaged, is quite resellable and can be salvaged by other people. There are people that will actually buy very damaged equipment to get individual electronic components off of to do repairs on expensive equipment.
Okay, that leads into my last topic to discuss is that would be what old technology do you just can't give up? That's old, outdated, discontinued, but you still have it working and you just can't give it up. So, Tim, do you have something in
I've
particular?
got tons of that
I'll
stuff.
go around, just one item. Just one item.
I've got an old Windows XP only system. I think it used a Pentium 4, and I keep it around in case I have a need for something under XP, which I did
Okay.
several years back.
Drew?
I don't have anything that old that I actually still rely on, but I have about 20 computers worth of KVM cables and switches that require the old green and blue and yellow
PS2
plugs.
connectors.
Yeah, yeah. That I still have in my garage that I haven't gotten rid of.
Yeah, I've still got some items that still work with PS2 connections.
Bob? I'm going to go around to everybody. So, Bob?
Well, I still have that Chromebook and I have some old video equipment which I haven't hooked up in a long time. I don't know if it'll even work, but it's not stuff I really want to hang on to. I just haven't gotten around to getting it recycled.
Got it.
I have a TiVo that just went out of service because I think the company discontinued them.
Yeah, they turned off that service, didn't they, on some of their old TiVos?
The
No,
old
I
TiVos
still
are a different
have
matter. Yeah,
I have two TiVos that work.
Yeah, TiVo still works. There's a TiVo Stream that still works. I also have an old Chromecast that is not the current version. And that's just sitting around. I have a Sling box that's just sitting around.
Okay, so I was just looking for one thing, and you gave it to me
Okay.
with the Chromebook.
Well, okay.
All right.
The one thing that I hadn't been giving up on was the Chromebook.
Okay. Dennis?
Yeah, I still have an XP machine. A couple of them that I haven't used them in a long time. I've kept them plugged in. And I have some old video, cameras and stuff that I can't get rid of. I want to keep.
Like VCR, VHS,
Um,
VHS-C?
One uses a VHS, the small tapes, and I think another one may take the bigger tapes. And I thought about, there's a Chicago company, maybe you've seen it advertised in your area too, Sanford. They Legacy legacybox.com, where they say you mail in your old VCR tapes or other tapes, and they'll
Yep.
convert it and put it onto disk for you, or put it on in the cloud or something.
Yep.
And I thought about stuff like that. But then again, I'm thinking back, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, when I, wake up on a Christmas morning and shoot 2 hours of video of the kids and the family in that morning. And later on, if I figured, well, why do I don't want to convert 2.5 hours, because probably if I do 2.5 hours, probably 2 hours of it is somewhat boring stuff. I want to get, like the highlights of it. So what I have been doing a little bit is playing this stuff through my TV, and then just using the iPhone to just catch segments. The quality is, not your best quality, but it gets what I want, and it's good enough to see. So that's
Yeah.
what
I guess that works. I don't think
Yeah.
Bert is back to be able to continue on. If Bert was there, I'd ask him. For me, the one thing that I still have that I still use to this day is an old Palm Pilot. Remember the old Palm Pilots? I still have
I have one.
I have a Palm Zaire 71, and I still use it to this today. Today, I actually still use it. I use a date function in there for like its calendaring, because I've started using this decades ago, and I just kept the calendar up and updated every day with pertinent information. So it's a device that I can't seem to get rid of.
It's time to export that and put it into your phone.
I don't know what should I put it in. How do you export a date book and move it from the Palm into what?
Check for converters. There's lots of converter programs out there. One of them might be able to read the old format and put it into a format.
See, the hinge that I found is, okay, I've got it. I can move it into another device if I felt like it. But one of the things that I do is I print out a monthly calendar of all the diary information that I put into this calendar. And I don't know if that exists clearly in iOS or on my phone or whatever I'm going to move it into. If I move it into another platform, I need to be able to present this information to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So I just found that the old system still worked for me, for what it's worth. So
you know what you need to do, Sanford?
Yes.
Get yourself a really old car and some vintage clothes, and then make people believe you're a time traveler.
Sanford used to have a background thing of an old car. I remember it. He had an old car in the background.
Yeah.
Or what you do is you go to Home Depot and you buy a sledgehammer.
One last thing that some of you may or may not be aware of, because I also post on CFCS's Discord page, and I collect data that I pass out in more FYIs. Microsoft had a stock drop of 10 to 11% recently, and suddenly they are apologizing. They are admitting that Windows 11 is broken badly, that there is big backlash over the AI, and they are now talking about fixing the bugs, number one. Number two, that they're going to start removing a lot of the AI, not all of it, but a lot of it. And number three, they've already suspended Recall, which only works on Copilot Plus laptops, and if there were any desktops created, which means they had an NPU in them. And so the end result is we may finally get some sanity back into Windows 11. but it's not going to be done just like that. It's going to be something that is gradual.
Right. Okay. With that, I'll conclude tonight's meeting and end our recording.
Yeah.
Recording stopped.